Hi, and welcome to the Great CEOs podcast, where great CEOs share their insights in a snappy 10-minute conversation. I'm your host, Pam Singleton of Inc. CEO Project, and I'm here with Antonio Gallizio, Swap.com. So welcome, Antonio. How are you?
Very good, Pam. Thank you for having me.
Oh, good. Thank you for being here. Tell us about yourself and Swap.com.
Yeah, so Swap.com is an e-commerce marketplace for secondhand or also new with tagged products. We've been in the United States since 2012. We are very focused on providing an alternative to fast fashion and reducing the total amount of waste that comes from it. So we're very happy on our mission. We've been trotting along and continue to see progress in the market and excited to see what's coming up next.
Right, very good. There are other places I can buy secondhand clothing. What's your competitive advantage?
So we operate in some sense from the customer's point of view. So the end buyer, we can be considered quite similar. Our net benefit to the end buyer is that we can operate at a lower sales price than most of our competitors just because we run such a lean operation. And that translates to better savings to the customer at the end of the day. And we've seen that has brought us quite a bit of success, especially for the everyday clothing. And we're constantly trying to improve, provide more high-end products. And I think our customers will start seeing more of that soon. But our bread and butter is really this everyday wear, which in our opinion then competes with fast fashion.
You have a number of key partnerships, I believe.
Yeah, so in terms of our lean operation, part of what we do differently is work with the guys in our industry. And that results in providing e-commerce capabilities to people within the industry that may not have had that before. And especially with the current pandemic going on, it has become clearer and clearer, although it is for the vast majority of the United States, that e-commerce is a way forward. But especially for the guys in our industry who have traditionally worked in secondhand, e-commerce as a pillar of their own business is now clearer than ever. And we're trying to tap into that as much as possible and give them an opportunity to enter the e-commerce space in a very seamless sort of way and give us access to inventory that would otherwise not be available. So on the product side, we still focus heavily on our sellers who we love and we want to keep providing a great service to, and we will. But on a merchandising perspective, it's good to have some big partnerships as well.
Certainly. Do you have any recurring revenue?
So being a marketplace, recurring revenue is, at least from my understanding, defined as return customers. And we see that return customers do represent that fairly industry standard 80-20 rule. And if then you obviously were to invert that number, you'd see what percentage of our returning customers actually result in that 80% of the revenue on the first place. So we generally do a good job at retaining customers just because of our value proposition. This being a fundamentally price-driven market to some extent, I think loyalty is something that in our case we're proud of, we want to improve, but we understand that people who shop thrift generally shop around. And it's just the nature of the industry. We want to continually provide the best products possible because we know that a sale today is not a guaranteed sale tomorrow. So it really pushes us to be honest, which I personally really like.
Having continued access to your partners' merchandise is critical for you. So it could be said that you're servicing your customers, and those are repeat revenues. Just to have access to the merchandise, that would be a form of recurring revenue. Every business has constraints. So, those strategic issues you could eliminate to move the business forward faster. What are those for you?
So kind of flowing in from the previous question of the partners, we've learned a lot from our partners. And I think the word partners is really true here, that we are developing this product and this product stream together. And one thing that we've learned a lot from our partners, especially our strategic investor, who has been operating in our space, granted a bit downstream than us for quite some time, is the value of monetizing every piece of inventory, which sounds obviously very clear, like every business should be doing that. But when you're chasing top line growth all the time, this starts to creep in. And we've been spending a lot of time, and will continue to spend a lot of time, focusing on how to make sure none of our inventory really goes to waste. And like I said in the beginning, we are trying to minimize waste from fast fashion, which means taking people away from fast fashion. So any guy who buys from one of our competitors, good for you, because you're entering the market. But when you look at what actually needs to happen downstream in our constraints, both from a working capital perspective and from a mission perspective, is what do you do with that inventory that even after it's gone through liquidation, even after it's been sent to your partners, even after it's been put on your website and it's been sitting there for 180 days, what do you do with that? And for us, the answer is a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things to do at that point. And the more we grow, the more we learn, especially from our partners, the more we understand what to do with it. And it starts off from other marketplaces where you can offer that product, to as simple as looking into recycling options to turn it into new fibers. And we're going to look at A, B through Z, and there's no silver bullet, so just learn from it.
Inventory, capital tied up in inventory.
From a business perspective, that is the issue. Yes, and we're working on it, but that is what I think everyone in our space is going to run into over a certain period of time, because it is lower margins in traditional fashion, so you need to be effective on all of the inventory.
Absolutely. So how many hours a week are you working these days?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, especially now. I have always been of the idea that effective hours and actual hours spent on work are a little bit different. So if I had to say, what is the amount of time you spend thinking about, what are you going to do, and what are the amount of hours that you spend contemplating the next decision or focusing on the next meeting, I don't think anyone in a role of CEO does less than 80 or 90 hours a week on that. But in terms of what, an Ernst & Young would call working hours, I don't think it would be more than 30, because, how much time do you actually spend sitting on the computer versus walking around on the phone with your employees, partners, investors who actually become friends? So I don't know. I guess it's relative.
Where do you allocate your time, those 30 hours or more, as the case may be?
Yeah, I think I generally tend to allocate that time on projects. So I tend to have maybe 15 hours a week, which are standard, catching up on projects that have been done by other employees, catching up on what's going on with new partners and all of this situation here. Most of the other time of those 15 hours, but also of the other 30 hours that you spend thinking, is putting a project up on its legs and then handing it over to somebody.
Great.
So yeah, I want to be involved in the beginning and I want to be involved in the end, but I don't want to be involved in the middle, because that's how I get to a 100-hour work week, which nobody really wants to do.
That's exactly right. Your role as CEO is to get in, figure out something that's holding you back, and hand it off to somebody else. So what specific responsibility have you delegated in the last 6 months?
I personally, especially now, I personally try to delegate as much as possible, just because I know that I am definitely not the most competent person in my organization. And, I've even delegated all of the marketplace operations to a great person who has been with us almost since the beginning, and she can walk circles around me, on her worst day. And especially with a lot of these projects, handing off, for example, our partnership communications and our partnership integrations to somebody who actually built the hardware that we know how to put it in there. So we promoted him, and now he's the one who actually goes in and implements our partnerships. And that's just a few examples, but generally everything.
That frees you up to focus on the more strategic stuff.
Yeah.
You have been a member of a number of boards, and so in fact, this is your first gig as CEO. What defines your approach these days? What have you learned?
Yeah, a lot. I think that as a board member, you are much more involved in big issues. You're involved in annual situations in terms of what is a strategy going forward. You're very heavily involved when there's a financing round taking place. You're very heavily involved when something is going wrong. And at least my experience personally has been very hand in hand with the CEOs. And I've learned to appreciate that from my board. And I've learned to see what the shortcomings are of an actual board of directors and what the requirements are of it on the other side of the spectrum. So I've learned really the painstaking toll that it is to have true form responsibility for an organization. Because even if at the end of the day, the board of directors might supersede you in terms of legal liabilities or whatever might be coming up, the staff and your teams, they will look at you as the ultimate source of responsibility because they don't have a relationship with the board.
That's right.
And, simple things like, benefits, which are not simple, obviously, but, I don't think as a board of director, I've spent more than 10 minutes thinking about what benefits to provide our employees. Mm-hmm. I've spent weeks now, like as a big thing, how do we remain competitive with benefits? How do we make sure that everyone is healthy? How do we make sure that everyone is safe? How do we make sure that everyone feels like it's a situation where they can tell me, no, Thursday I can't because my child's daycare had a situation where, I can't make this meeting. And making everyone feel comfortable, in my opinion, is something that as a board member, it's all theoretical at the end of the day, as much as I would like to be strategic. But as a CEO, you're really in the deep end because there's no one to look left, right, or center. It's you.
Exactly right. It's a lonely, being CEO is a lonely position. You can't always discuss everything with your board, and people look to you to have all the answers. So sometimes you can't brainstorm with them either. It's a difficult spot. And lots of times investors and board members don't appreciate just how hard it is until they've had that operating experience. So I predict you'll be an even better board member going forward. What do you do for fun?
Well, I was a chef a little bit for a time in the past when I was in between sort of things. I don't know how long ago now. And I always loved to cook, generally for a lot of people. The result of COVID is just that now I have 15 days worth of leftovers every time I prepare anything. But that's what I generally do to relax. I like to cook something like extravagant.
Do you have a favorite dish?
Off the top of my head now, ossobuco probably.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, many thanks for being here, Antonio Gallizio, CEO of Swap.com. You can learn more about Swap.com at swap.com. So thank you.
We made it very easy for you.
If you're interested in what other great CEOs are thinking, go to greatceospodcast.com. And thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Pam.